So, in the studio, let's welcome our guests. We've got, sitting to the right of me, Monique Chartier. If you're a talk show listener, you know that she is a tireless advocate on behalf of the Rhode Island taxpayer, the Rhode Island Taxpayer Association, for whom she is a spokesman. She's also a spokesman for Stop Tolls RI. She's communications director and RI Taxpayers Taxpayer Times newsletter editor. Also joining me in the studio right now is Tony Viveros. You may remember Tony from, I don't know, what was it, years ago when there was some notion that there was going to be tolls out on 195 or something, and I don't know, years ago I think they beat that back, and I don't know, there were some efforts to mitigate the situation, and I don't know, they told us it was never going to be. But Tony, Monique, welcome to the Coalition. Joining us in the second half hour is going to be Larry Fitzmaurice, and at sometime soon, Representative Pat Morgan, who has become the hero, if you will, of taxpayers' rights in this state, as literally a lone voice in the wilderness, who has now been joined by this great Stop Tolls RI coalition, will be joining us as well. So, folks, after all of that, welcome to the coalition.
Thank you, Pat.
All right. Let's actually, I see Pat Morgan is on the line right now. So, if our ace producer can pull her up. Pat, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hi, how are you?
Great. Welcome to the coalition. Representative Morgan has been on a couple of times already. Let's cut right to the chase. You're a Republican study group. We're going a little bit out of order here, but there's a rich history here now in the last year or so where you and and some of your comrades in the Republican Party Senate representatives got together and anticipating, if you will, the next big chaos, so we'll call it the chaos du jour here in Rhode Island, would be, of course, transportation, and particularly our roads and bridges. So give us a little history, because we have, and you folks have been tirelessly on the radio for the last few weeks. We have a slightly different demographic. So if you give us a little background on what your study group found and what you think is the real issue here and how you think we should approach it as a state.
Well, the governor proposed the tolling. I mean, she's not just tolling one road, one turnpike. She wants to toll all of them, 4 major highways in Rhode Island, and take $60 to $80 million a year from our economy to repair our bridges. Now, everybody can agree that the bridges need to be repaired, but tolling is the absolute worst way to go. It's just a weight on our economy, which is stagnant. We haven't recovered in Rhode Island. Families are still struggling. So the Republican Policy Group, we spent the summer looking at the budget, and we found specific, sustainable sources of money in our budget. It is less than 1% of our budget. And we can use that money to repair the bridges, and we don't have to borrow. We don't have to toll. We don't have to hurt Rhode Island families, consumers, our small businesses, or the trucking industry. The money is there.
And here's the irony. I mean, this is allegedly, by her own description in her candidacy, is a left-wing, pure party Democrat who is promoting ultimately a highly regressive form of taxation, isn't she?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you're a single mom, going to work while you're trying to go to CCRI or RIC and trying to rip yourself out of that while at the same time paying child care, do you want the prices of your goods and services going up, as well as ultimately, as we all know, as you folks like to say, first trucks, then cars? Is it fair?
Exactly. Nobody is being fooled that the cost of these tolls is not going to find its way into food and drugs and everything that we buy. So nobody is fooled by this idea that only trucks are going to pay it. No, we're all going to pay it in the things that we buy. And I do believe that ultimately it will just be too irresistible for state leaders to not try to dip into it for general revenue, to fund other things like our deficit.
And if I could just jump in here, you're hitting on it. It's such a critical point. Our state leaders are pretending that these tolls, the cost of these tolls, that they're just going to be absorbed entirely by the drivers, by the trucking companies, and it will not be visited on the residents of Rhode Island, the businesses of Rhode Island. This is a complete myth. These tolls, the cost of these tolls will be passed on to residents in the form of anything that's trucked in, higher goods, consumer goods, and it will be more of a burden on businesses. So this is just such a myth that the trucks and the trucking companies and the drivers are going to absorb these tolls only. They will be visited upon the residents of Rhode Island. It's such a critical point that you're both making.
Well, let me jump in, too. I have a question. And I'm ultimately going to ask everyone in the room for this take. Twofold. Number one, Representative Morgan, are we missing in our rush to judgment here? Because it seems like I'm in my mid-50s. I've lived through a number of, I'll say, governmental crises and filed under never let a good crisis go to waste. You know, everything from Shark Week to Ebola to now Rhode Island bridges collapsing. In our rush to judgment, first off, are we missing a generational opportunity to really review and study how we finance our infrastructure?
Well, I mean, I think I think we're missing an opportunity to make sure that government is efficient and effective and squeezes value out of every dollar that we give to it. So there's the issue. There is so much waste. And I think the people of Rhode Island know that. To say that we can't take less than 1% of our budget to fix bridges is ludicrous, right? It is less than 1%. And somehow we're not looking for that 1%. Instead, we're looking for an entirely new revenue stream.
That's right.
But we're just looking for ways to get more money out of Rhode Islanders. That's what we're missing here. We give Rhode Island government plenty of dollars. They're just not using it wisely, and they really need to start prioritizing those things that government should be taking care of, like our bridges and roads.
Now, let me jump in and ask you another question. All right. Do you ever get the feeling in this rush to solve this bridge emergency that all these alleged infrastructure costs are nothing more than an excuse to pay off essentially a campaign debt, whether it be to her Wall Street supporters or to the union? That there's really no desire to really substantively study what our infrastructure and transportation needs are for the 21st and really the 22nd century? That this is just, a quick hit along the bumpy path that is Gina Raimondo's political career?
I'm going to let the people make that decision for themselves. But this is one thing I do know. 2 years ago, when we did not toll the Sakonnet River Bridge, rightfully so, we passed an increase in DMV fees. So we raised them by 40%, and we also tied the gas tax to inflation. And at the time, the explanation for doing this was that all of that money would be used to repair our roads and bridges, and that there was a plan in place, and there was going to be plenty of money just from that increase in the fees and the taxes to take care of all those infrastructure needs. Now, 2 years later, it is a crisis. I'm wondering how it became a crisis in 2 years when 2 years ago we said, okay, if we do this, we will have the money and we will start putting it to work, and we will get all of these issues resolved or all the bridges and the roads repaired over a period of time, but that money was going to be used for it.
Well,
I mean, it all of a sudden become a crisis that we now need to borrow $600 million.
Well, isn't there and I'll leave this question hanging out there. Isn't there a pattern here? I mean, we solved, and I'm on the radio, thank God, so you can't see me doing air quotes, but we solved the pension crisis, except last week we found out we hadn't. We solved the roads and bridge crisis, although, yikes, it appears we haven't. We've solved, the DOT crisis, except the people just went back to work. So far, all these problems we solved, we solved the Sakonnet River Bridge issue, except we didn't. There seems to be a pathology here that I guess we'll call it, as I love to call it, short attention span theater, that somehow there's a 2 years, essentially term limit to our memory as Rhode Island taxpayers, and that we're just going to nod our head dumbly as if the 2 years prior to this never happened. It's astonishing to me that they would think we have such a short-term institutional memory. But I won't put you on that spot, Representative Morgan.
Okay.
You'll be joining us, I guess, at this rally. And I imagine you're going to be one of the featured speakers. I have to ask you about the now infamous 1882 map.
Yes, thank you.
A statement was issued that somehow in their rush to provide you with paperwork, something to the madness to the effect of that somehow this, because of full disclosure requirements, as if that's ever mattered to this administration, that somehow that got accidentally included in there. Do you have any one or two word response to that?
It was ludicrous that
Yes.
I got road maps from 1882 before we had cars, when what I asked for were maps and information dealing with 2015. Where was the location of the tolling booth? Where was that going to be? And what about the diversion route? So I got 1882, but I didn't get 2015. There's an aversion in this administration to transparency and really giving the people of Rhode Island the straight answers.
Do you expect this to change anytime soon, or is this going to just be a pitched battle to the end, a la the stadium?
I have no idea. People need to trust government. They need to be given honest answers and thorough answers. They need to be given all of the data so that they know that government is serving them well. And when they don't get that, then, of course, there is a cynicism, and rightfully so, a cynicism that sets in. This is what I know. We don't need tolls. We absolutely don't need them at all. And we can still get our roads and bridges fixed. It just takes leadership, and it takes a willingness to prioritize spending, not just look for new revenue, but prioritize the revenue we already take.
Well said. Well said. Well, again, we've had the pleasure of speaking remotely with Representative Patricia Morgan. Joining me in studio, Monique Chartier, spokesman and all-around communications goddess for Rhode Island Taxpayers Association, as well as the Stop Tolls RI. Joining me right now is Tony Viveros, a member of the StopTollsRI.com coalition, and was one of the leaders in the Stop Seconic Toll Opposition Platform, that organization that allegedly did a heroic job fighting back at the time the Seconic River Tolls Bridge. So, Mr. Viveros, welcome to the coalition. First of all, thank you so much for joining us and coming in studio. How did we get here? The last time I checked, you folks, in conjunction with the West Bay delegation, had achieved total victory. You'd found a way to take the state costs and essentially amortize them over the entire state taxpayer base. It stopped an unfair and what would have been a near-death blow to the Aquidneck Island tourism economy. And we all celebrated. Is there any level of disappointment in the promises that were made to the taxpayers of Rhode Island, and particularly Aquidneck Island in the West Bay?
Well, what we finally decided, what came out of all negotiations, all the talking to our reps and with Jay Edwards, Luda Palmer, was what we thought was an economic roadmap to solving the problem. We had put something in place. We knew it wasn't an overnight solution. We knew it was going to be about 10 years. I mean, the bridges didn't fall or get to the point where they are today overnight. It was total mismanagement of DOT at the time, and we thought we had something in place. But the governor decided she was going to try and do everything all at once. Mm-hmm. And, you have to crawl before you walk and walk before you run, and the state has been mismanaged for some 50 or 60 years, so this didn't happen overnight. And like I say, we had a program. We thought we had one in place that could eventually lead to it, but eventually politics, when you have a cessation for spending, it's hard to cut back. Mm-hmm. And there's never a reduction in spending. There's always looking for new revenue. That's what happened with the tolls on Seconic Bridge. Mayor Kacheri put together a blue ribbon panel to come up and find a solution to the economic woes of the state. They came up with, I think, 14 or 16 provisions, and they decided that the easiest chicken to pluck was the Kootenai Island and putting the tolls on the bridge. They did do a count of the number of cars on the Mount Hope Bridge. At first, it was going to be the Mount Hope Bridge, but when they took a count on the Sakonnet, there was more traffic on the Sakonnet than it was on the Mount Hope, so that's where they put the tolls. But there was a lot of people that was going to go out of business. We showed the fact that it was unsustainable, that the state was going to actually lose money.
Right.
And what happens? Now they come back and they want to toll the trucking industry. We have UPS, who has already said that they're going to move or relocate 10 tractor trailers to Massachusetts and the jobs that go with it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Already we're seeing the effect.
In the sky.
That's right.
I haven't seen any new jobs. The only jobs that were created was some 42 state jobs. I think they were created by the governor.
Right.
That's absolutely right.
Monique has, and again, I'm speaking to Monique Chartier. Have any of the West Bay reps reached out to you folks with any sense of outrage that essentially this is trashed the plan that was worked on so hard by individuals and themselves?
No one has said that I'm aware of so far. If I could just take a quick minute to please encourage everybody or invite everybody to go to www.stoptollsri.com. There's a petition there and a way that you can contact your legislator. Mm-hmm. That would be terrific. No, they have not. They have not reached out and said that to us. But this is sort of happening very quickly, and you probably have heard the rumor has been that they want to move on this very quickly in January.
Right.
One of the things that I found when this all happened, I went to different reps and people in the different sections of the state, and what I heard from the reps were, well, yeah, the tolls. We don't agree with the tolls. That's not right. But how can I ask my constituents to pay for your bridges? Well, I also heard that toll bridge don't affect them. They don't use the bridge. But it's that kind of attitude that leads to this, mm-hmm. because now it is affecting them. Right. So if we don't get together as people of the state and work together for the betterment of everyone in the state, they're going to divide us, and they're going to wind up conquering us, and we're all going to pay the price.
Right, and they're trying to do that.
We have to go. The people have to go to Stop Tolls RI, get educated as to what is going on, how they can volunteer, what they can do to help. If they can contribute, fine. But we need to get the word out. They need to call their legislators, and especially the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, and let them know. The Speaker of the House said it wasn't fair that one section of the country or the state pays for the others. He didn't feel that the tolls were right on the Sakonnet. But now it's okay statewide. The people have to band together and speak up and stop watching out for one another.
Yeah, I just was going to further to that point is that they tried to divide us at the Sakonnet when it came to the Sakonnet River Bridge. But ultimately, people around the state were very concerned about the toll that might go on that bridge because they knew that if it came to that bridge, it was going to come to a bridge near us. And now they're trying to do exactly the same thing with the truckers. And if we permit them to put the tolls on the truckers, it's trucks today, cars tomorrow. If any toll goes in anywhere, whether it's on one bridge, in East Bay, or if it goes on the truckers, it's going to go statewide and sooner rather than later. And we know that. And we don't. That's just not acceptable. It is not a good solution for the state.
Well, with the Sakonnet toll incident, we had Hodges Badge that was going to move to Fall River.
Oh, my God.
Those Clam Shack was going to close because nobody wanted to pay an extra $7 for pay the clams. And also 15 Point Road Restaurant, they also said the same thing.
God.
And now UPS is just justifying or verifying what was said with the Sakonnet tolls.
Correct.
The state as a whole, they're going to lose sales tax money, they're going to lose income tax money because of wages, and they're going to be paying out more in unemployment.
Well, and the sad part is the pathology, again, looking at the bigger trends. Number one, when we reinstituted the car tax, there was no discussion as to revenue neutrality with regard to any lost sales taxes on new cars purchased. Now we're talking about the same ticket. We're talking about increasing a tax, because it is a tax, call it what you will.
Thank you.
And then at the same time, expecting not other taxes not to be impacted, whether it be payroll taxes, sales taxes. I mean, ultimately, Rhode Island is got a pot of money. There's a sense, there's a limitation, particularly in a moribund economy like this, of disposable income. It goes somewhere, it then goes nowhere else. And government is ultimately always the wrong place to put it because of simple economics. You don't have the multiplier effect when it's funneled into the black hole that is our government, that opens sore. And so it stops there, and as a result, there's no... Why are we... And let me throw this out to all of you. Why are Rhode Islanders always rooting for the revenue count? Why are always... what had to make you nuts this week is listening to individuals in businesses say, well, I don't mind a little bit more on the gas tax. I mean, why are Rhode Islanders... When it comes to gambling, well, if we have more gambling, it'll raise more revenue to the state. Huzzah! That solves all our problems. Of course, the problem is all this money is coming from us.
Right, exactly.
That's what they said about the lottery. The lottery was going to pay for education. Yeah, and that didn't go. They added 1% to the sales tax to cover the banking crisis.
Right.
That's long gone. I just received information that Congress passed a long-term transportation funding bill that will boost investments in Rhode Island by more than $270 million a year for the next 5 years. That comes to $1.35 billion. Of course, there's a match, which is going to be, according to my figures, about $270 million. But that still leaves, over for 5 years, $1.08 billion.
Right. And so, again, to Representative Morgan's credit, that $275 million match represents an infinitesimally small piece of our budget.
Yes, it does. Exactly.
So the question then becomes, once again, and I'll throw this out to you, Monique, in this rush to judgment, in this, crisis du jour environment that the governor has put us in by infamously shutting down the bridge to Park Avenue so that a certain individual couldn't get to his real estate and law practice, are we again missing an opportunity to have a frank conversation about the right way to fund? And let me throw this in: wasn't the prior Democratic governor Lincoln Chafee's big deal that to pay as you go?
And that was one of the few good things that Governor Chafee did, was he put it in so that he made it so that we were no longer borrowing for our infrastructure needs. And that seems to be something that Governor Raimondo, who is supposed to be a fiscal person, is rushing to do away with. But you're absolutely right. She's rushing towards the tolls headlong, while at the same time, by the way, her plan doesn't go into effect by apparently their own schedule for 18 months. So it's this sort of mixed message of we have to do this now, but it's not going to go into effect right away. And as you say, we need to take this more slowly and think it through. And I'm sure that everybody is willing to have the conversation. Are we funding it properly? Are we doing it the right way? The 610 connector, should that be a boulevard? That definitely is a conversation that needs to be had. Yes, these are all things that we should be talking about, no question.
Right, and before we invest, and I use the term invest very loosely here, before we invest in Wall Street, $1 billion obligation. I mean, we're upset. We're having a collective nervous breakdown about the $100 million that we lost to 38 studios. Yes. And yet, at the same time, the same administration, who has a attitude as to fare thee well to that money, seems equally complicit in just rushing to spend $1 billion. That's with a B dollars. Exactly. I mean, her plan would be 100% markup, but the cost of the repairs under her plan would be $600 million. It would cost another $600 million, squandered on the gantries and on the interest. It's just Pat, Monique mentioned about the 610 connector in the transportation bill. It's another $4.5 billion for repairs to the 610 connector. So when she says we're going to use some of that money for 610 connector, and then what do we need a bus lane for? We absolutely do not. We don't need a bus lane, as from my understanding. Well, again, there's no, and we're going to take a quick break right now, but there's been no real discussion of the underlying. There is no plan. Correct. That's the problem. Correct. When you look at this whole mess, there is no plan. Most importantly, this Tuesday from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock at the State House Rotunda. And by the way, if you walk in and you feel an overarching sense of evil, a sense of dread, much like Harry Potter would if he knew that Voldemort was near, you're not alone. It's legit. Again, 3 to 5 o'clock, State House Rotunda. Stop Tolls RI press conference and rally. Be there to scare the squares. Joining me now, in addition to Monique Chardonnay, Larry Fitzmaurice. Larry is another representative of the Stop Tolls RI. As we reach the next stage in our Tollapalooza, Larry, welcome to the coalition.
Thanks, Pat.
One of my themes for this show tonight, again, is lost opportunities. Your reflection. We're hell-bent to pass tolls to fund an infrastructure that we're not sure what it's going to look like. We're not sure what the direction's going to be. And we're not really sure where this fits in with this incredible mishmash of bridge and toll and road financing, this incredibly twisted stew, this kind of witch's brew of federal funding, federal matching, state funding, state bonded, state current expense, thrown in with a DOT that is sort of privatized, but actually countering the national trend by hiring more people, but at the same time with there's no strategic vision, is there, for any of this at any level in the state?
None whatsoever. I mean, when they rolled this program out under the underpass, it became clear within weeks that it was poorly planned and poorly put together. I think that should be a lesson to us all. We're headed into another one of these things that hasn't had sufficient research and understanding, and it's going to be executed by an outfit that is charging us high cost for the transportation grid we have now, and we're just going to throw more money at them and expect them to do a better job. I think that's wholly unreasonable, and it's because this thing is so complex that nobody knows how to figure it out or run it. And until the DOT can get its act together and start to demonstrate an efficiency, because we have a high-cost, low-performance system. The roads are falling apart and the bridges are falling apart, yet we're paying some of the highest cost for transportation in the country. And until we can solve that problem, giving them another $600 million isn't going to get much for our money.
I mean, ultimately, you're giving drugs to a drug addict, are you?
Well, I wouldn't want to say they were drug addicts, but they're certainly
our
money
is.
addicts.
Our government certainly is. I mean, and money is the drug, and that's my terminology. There really is no demonstrated core competency, really, at any level, any place in the state when it comes to infrastructure, is there?
No, there's not. I mean, if you look at the state taken as a whole, it's how it performs across the board. High cost and low performance. And until we start to manage our way through the funds we've already got, I don't think it's reasonable to expect the taxpayers to cough in more money. As you've already pointed out, this is not a tax on trucks. This is going to be a tax on goods and services, well, at least goods, and everybody's going to get to pay it, and most of the trucks are going to drive around the state. So, our costs are going to go up.
So we're going to pray like hell, and probably no one's going to show up.
I think so, and I think that their estimates for revenue, if they would ever actually publish something we believe, or even ones they do publish, don't look all that reasonable to me. It's too easy to drive around the state, and so if we're going to tax, you're right, it is a tax. If we're going to tax the long haul 18-wheelers from the out of state, which is the way this thing has been sold, we have to understand it's real easy to avoid the state. It's real easy to deliver to a depot, for instance, in Fall River, and shift it into non-taxable trucks and deliver it that way. And it's too easy to get around this stuff. It's not gonna generate the money. And our calculations indicate they're going to need at least $47 million in the first year of this bond to pay the interest and principal. And if they don't get that, the cars are going to pay the price, because this system is going to record the license plate on every vehicle that goes through it. When we were involved with Tony and I and the rest of them in the Sakana Tolls fight, we did the technical research on the systems that they were going to use, and it did use for a while. And they read everything, and it's a mature system, and it will record everybody's license plate, and they'll just throw out the cars initially. And they'll send a bill to the trucks that qualify. So when they run short of cash, or in some future assembly, which is not bound by any rules they pass in this one, and they're short of cash, we're going to get a little bill in the mail from the state for driving across 17 or more of these bridges in the state.
And the effect is cumulative, because ultimately, when it comes to corporations, they're taxed at multiple levels. And the way they're taxed, particularly at the state level, is that income, expenses, capital are apportioned on a state-by-state basis. So let's take UPS and Ocean State Job Lot, two of the most easily recognizable faces, if you will. Let's put real human faces on the companies affected. Ocean State Job Lot is a Rhode Island success story. If anything, you must credit them for being successes despite the best efforts that Rhode Island has made.
I'm afraid so.
All right, I work in Waltham, Massachusetts. There is an Ocean State Job Lot across the street from me in Waltham, Massachusetts. Now, take the 10 trucks that were discussed with regard to UPS, and let's just move. I mean, at this point, my understanding of Ocean State Job Lot is Rhode Island is almost really becoming an afterthought. So you move that business out of the state. All right, so ultimately you're losing gasoline taxes. You're losing, any potential inventory taxes that relate to the inventory that these people are accumulating in warehouses.
Certainly.
You're losing payroll taxes on the people that are employed. You're losing corporate income taxes because all of those factors that we consider in calculating corporate state income taxes are essentially allocated to Massachusetts out of it. We've got one very last quick break, but has anyone attempted to, outside of freedom and prosperity, and you folks, has anyone, and this is a rhetorical question, so we're going to take one last break, but has anyone attempted to put a number on that? Anyone?
What will we lose?
Yeah. Bueller? Bueller?
Nobody.
Nobody. Or in the words of a certain dean, 0.0. Folks, one last quick break, and we'll be right back.
R.O.
And yes, we are back for our final segment. It's amazing how quickly an hour goes by. Larry, when you think about it, we've only got two silver bullets left in our economic holster. Number one is tourism, and the Raimondo administration has done their best to obliterate that. And then, of course, really the only strength, and I don't want to be insulting, but I'll say this, that we've got in this state really is distribution. Location, not much else. What potential does this have to have impact on that industry?
Well, we have a tendency to go to the economic producers of wealth in this country and tax them, or at least in this state, and tax them. And what we're going to do is we're going to get less of everything we tax. And as we discussed previously, they don't really understand the idea that if they tax it, they're going to get less of it. Look back to the cigarette tax. They raised the cigarette tax. They got less money. So that's what we're going to get out of the trucking industry if we start taxing it. They're going to avoid this state to the extent that they can, and we're going to pull in less money when it's all said and done. We may get more money in tolls than we did zero before, but we're going to lose it at the other end.
So ultimately, it's a zero-sum game.
Or worse.
Yeah. Monique, tell us a little bit about this Tuesday's event.
Rally and press conference at the State House to object to every aspect of the idea of a toll. It is so bad for the state. Please come out and let your voice be heard. We know it's a very difficult time, but that is the first day of the General Assembly being in session, so we want to send them the message that we're not falling for the governor's toll plan and all of the myths that are incorporated in it.
If folks can't participate in this week's rally, what other opportunities do they have?
Please, if they could visit www.stoptollsri.com. You can contact your legislator, take a petition. And please also, even after you do that, please feel free to contact your legislator directly. Maybe as the session goes on and the bill is introduced, again, contact your legislator and let them know this is completely unacceptable. It was unacceptable in the East Bay, and it's unacceptable anywhere in Rhode Island.
This really should be a litmus test for the future political careers of our state legislators.
It absolutely is. This is just such a bad way to go, and I think that this is really radioactive to voters. It's just astonishing that they're even considering this, and that it is. You're absolutely right. I think that legislators really take their political life in their hands if they support any sort of toll. Because we have a very short. Let's just say there's a long-term memory here, isn't there? Well, yes, there is, and it's a very visceral thing. A toll, I'm going to have to pay a toll to go and buy milk, to go to work? Absolutely not. Unacceptable. And yet the elections are just a few short months away, aren't they? They are. Folks, I'm going to wrap this up. First of all, I want to thank the folks for coming in. StopTollsRI.com. And
again, this is critical that you get involved with this now. The bum's rush is on, as they would say in my generation. You know, you heard Laura Colicchio, Ace News Goddess, at the top of the hour talk about, Senator, Mr. Walnuts himself looking to get this through as quickly as possible, under the guise of it being good for the people. Folks, there's no plan here. There's no discussion of the future needs of our infrastructure for the state of Rhode Island. There's no discussion of the right way to finance our future needs. There's no discussion of the livability or any of the issues we discussed a few weeks ago with the Route 610 connector, with what I think is a wonderful idea to create a better Rhode Island. This week, more than any other week, take it personally. Have a great week.